I'm Amanda Silver.
And I'm Alex Howard.
And this is Dirty Laundry.
No, do your story. Do your story.
I don't know. I am. I need some of that Ninden Dungan whatever stuff.
That sort of reminds me of when I'm at IKEA. And I'm like, I need one of those good cheese. What aisle do I find that?
Or when you try and say like Yiddish words.
Also that.
Lachenkopf?
Nope, I won't even try it. On air?
Yeah.
Looking cup.
No, the you got the
This is like ASMR shit. Nobody's going to listen to us if I start doing the
Why people like ASMR? They want to hear you.
Is it just me that does it? It
No,
grosses
they
me out.
love it.
Anything that's like too mouthful.
Tap, 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 tap.
No.
Yeah.
Too mouthy, too like guttural. I'm grossed
You're
out by
already
people.
like you're getting nauseous.
I'm getting already grossed out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm like mad cringy right now.
Okay.
I don't want to do it.
Okay, I don't want to do it. So how was your weekend?
Okay, so I went away. Speaking of retreats, had a little girls.
I love your little retreat. You do these retreats. I don't do enough retreats.
Well, and as we learned from our guest today, I am a retreater. Like I retreat. I need to leave. I'm very much impacted by the environment.
Yeah.
So I need to change my environment, change my mood. Yeah. Like deal with things outside of where the thing was that caused that issue.
And like escape.
I like an escape.
You like an escape.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a retreater. I am a lone wolf. But what was really special about this weekend, it's like my peeps that I'm just so easy breeze with.
You don't have to be on with.
There's no putting on anything. Yeah. We're like literally didn't even put on a bra. Like you don't put anything on.
Right.
And it's that's my safe haven.
That's true like relaxation.
Yeah.
It's when you can just be yourself.
Yeah.
And you can just
those friends where you're like,
off.
I don't want to do whatever you guys are doing. I'm going to go sit over here and read.
They're not judging you. They're not like, oh, it's time for us to go do this activity. Like, that's not a trip.
Those aren't my people.
No.
So these were my people. And it was a lovely weekend.
And your weekend? I was a little jealous.
You had a good weekend.
I had a great weekend. Yeah. Speak of like being like influenced by your environment or whatever. I like had such a great weekend. The kids and I, we did the walk for Israel, which was amazing. I've done it a couple times, but like in growing up, we did it. Yeah. But it was never like what it was this past weekend.
Wait, so is this an annual
It's an
walk?
annual.
But obviously now is ever more important.
Ever more. And we had, I think, the biggest turnout ever. There was 50,000 people. And it was just the excitement. My kids were just, you could feel it. The music, the dancing, the singing, people were just happy to be together.
So beautiful.
And it was so beautiful. And like so many different community members, which was like from all different communities.
I think that's the thing that really got me. Because it doesn't feel like you're all very supported currently. So it's nice. It's really nice to see the diversity that was out there in support.
It really was amazing.
Oh, good.
And the funny thing was is that it's a long walk. Like long as it's 5 kilometers. Okay.
Was that like an hour? I guess with kids, maybe hour and a half?
I think it was like 2 hours.
Okay.
Because there's 50,000 people walking.
Yeah, you're not walking at a brisk pace. Yeah.
So when I was, my whole family went and I was talking with my sisters and I was like, I'm going to bring the double stroller. And one of my friends said to me, no, you're not. Your kids are old enough to be in a double stroller, okay? Like, come on, they're going to be embarrassed to be in a double stroller. And my sister, the same thing. My kids don't need it. We're going to walk. Their kids are about the same age. If I kid you not, my double stroller was like the hop on, hop off, like highlight of the trip, of the
double-decker bus.
Of the walk. I had so many kids frequenting my stroller, kids I didn't even know.
Oh, good.
I see a mother walking with like a tire. I'm like, hey, I have a spot. Just put her in. And then she'd rest for a bit and then go out. And it was like, I had all these kids who were like 9, 10-year-olds. Can I come in yet? Is it my turn yet? And it was really funny that they were, yeah. But pushing a double stroller.
Ooh, are you stiff? Are you a little sore?
No, I'm actually not.
Okay.
Yeah, I pushed it for 11,000 steps, whatever that means.
Give or take.
And then when we get to the end, my son goes, I want to take the stroller home. I'm like, I am pushing
He wanted you to walk him all the way home.
And do it again.
Oh.
Oh yeah. Granted, it was hard to get a car. It was hard to because all the streets were blocked off. I was like, no.
Nobody.
No. We are not walking. One way was enough. But it was just like we were on such a high from it.
Yeah.
Like my kids just really loved it. It was something that we really needed. Being in Toronto, it's not been an easy time for us. So it was just to see so many people come out and support was really wonderful. So it was great. Yeah.
Good.
A different type of refueling than your weekend. But,
yes. But just as important.
Just as important. Yeah. I feel like I refueled my soul.
Yeah.
Right?
Recharge that battery.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And we're recording on a Monday today.
We are.
For our very special guest. This was what her schedule allowed. And we are so lucky to have her. So Dawn Wiggins is a divorce recovery coach and therapist. She helps people tear down their walls and build back their confidence. I mean, who needs that more than folks going through divorce? It's so beautiful. So she is trained and integrates multiple modalities from EMDR to EFT, tapping, immersion, journaling, homeopathy, and embraces remedies that heal the mind and the body.
Okay, so welcome, Dawn, to Dirty Laundry. We're so happy to have you here.
Aw, thank you. I'm very excited.
And hello to your little puppy as well. She's very cute.
Yes, he's asleep now.
Oh, God. Well, that was exciting.
Having fast.
She's going to nap it off. Yeah.
It's a big day, a rough day.
Oh, rough day.
Okay, so let's get started with who you are, what you do, your backstory.
Okay, backstory.
All right. How'd you get to where you are? All the way to
I was
childhood.
born in the middle of the night, actually 44 years ago Friday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So I was born into a family of divorce, right? Just like a lot of traumatic stuff, right? Two parents who just didn't really have it together, right? And at a very, very young age, I took an aptitude test and came out of that aptitude test and told my mom that I wanted to be a therapist. And the aptitude test confirmed that. This was in middle school.
Wow.
The same time, they're in marriage counseling, but it's not working at all, which plants a seed in my mind, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to become a therapist and I'm going to save all the children from this pain and suffering, right? Wow. So codependent. But anyways, fast forward, went to grad school, was hell on wheels to do this thing. And somewhere in there at a very young age, I got married. I was 22 and told myself that I wasn't going to get divorced, right? That I was going to break these cycles. But I hadn't actually dealt with all the actual stuff, right? I was using basically this marriage to rescue me from the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, fast forward 8 years in this marriage and it's coming unglued, there's a lot, it's breaking down. It's pretty bad. Now, we don't have kids. Actually, we were diagnosed infertile. There were a lot of things that contributed to the divorce. But, we were like, okay, well, is this worth it? Are we going to stay in it? And we went to marriage counseling. But I can acknowledge that I was intimidated. I was a therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, very intimidated to go see a therapist, which is a hallmark that I hadn't done the work, right? So if you're seeing a therapist and that therapist hasn't been to therapy, you need a different therapist.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I thought you had to be in either group or individual
as
therapy
part of your training.
as a therapist.
So our requirement when I was in grad school, which was many moons ago at this point, you had to have completed 3 sessions.
Oh, that's it.
That's not like being in therapy.
No, that's very different.
That's just sort of
Yeah.
Okay, so continue.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and I had done 3 sessions. I had been to therapy, but I hadn't ever actually gotten to the root of the things. So now I'm getting divorced and I'm a therapist and it's super embarrassing. But I decided to go full on into my own healing journey. I joined Al-Anon and get a sponsor and work the steps. I went to personal development workshops. I joined a women's group. I had an individual therapist. I moved in next door across the street from the beach, got a convertible, lived next door to my best friend. I did the cliche stuff. I did the healing stuff. I did all the stuff. And I got so much better.
Yeah.
And I started to realize there was, you can't think yourself out of trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't as popular a concept yet at the time, right? That you can't think yourself out of trauma. And so as a result of all that, as I got better and I got a little lump sum alimony, I decided to open my own private practice. And so I did this massive risky thing at a very risky time in life, it felt like, but it was what I was supposed to do. And I had a chronic illness. I had cluster headaches for about I don't know, maybe 5-6 years then. It was really awful, but I was like, well, I'm going to figure it out. And being my own boss gave me better work-life balance, right? I could practice self-care and I could do the things. But because of the cluster headaches, I knew that there was something I hadn't yet resolved inside of me, because we know now from the research that the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more likely you are to have chronic illness, later down the road.
Yep.
And so I stayed on this hell-bent healing journey to get to the root of why do I have these headaches? And so I would always want to learn a new modality or try something new. So, whether it was past life regression hypnosis therapy or, or like some obscure yoga practice or acupuncture, you name it, I've tried it. And so now we're like in my 30s. I've had my private practice. It's pretty successful. I'm doing a lot of marriage counseling. I'm actually niched to marriage counseling and it feels depressing. And I'm like, this isn't very rewarding as a therapist, right? It doesn't work that well. And a lot of people come and they have a kind of mismatched motivation to work on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's not so often that both people in a marriage really want to do that massive overhaul. And talk therapy, they're just not getting better fast enough, right? And they're not getting better enough outside of session. And there's something wrong with this process. So by this time, I've gotten remarried. I've had a kid. Yes, right? Like my ex had 4 kids. I had a kid. So that whole infertility, right? Like we were supposed to let go, right? We were supposed to let go.
It wasn't meant to be.
Right. I still have cluster headaches. I'm now in functional medicine, right? Like functional medicine, I'm doing bioidentical hormone replacement, still trying all the things. Yeah. And I become EMDR trained, EMDR therapy trained, right? So this is a experiential technique that gets into the trauma work, gets into the subconscious mind, gets into the somatic, the physical processing, right, in the body. And I'm like, oh, this works, right? This is a game changer. And I start to get even a little bit better, right? I become an EMDR patient myself. So I do even deeper work myself. And I start using it in couples counseling. And I'm like, aha, now, right, we can make a little more of a dent because this is something that actually changes the way people view themselves and relationships. So either which way, people who come to marriage counseling, I think they wait too long, right? And it's just so much resentment and so far gone. And at this point, I'm making such a difference in the lives of people using EMDR. I say to myself, like, where could I make a bigger impact? Where are people more prepared, right, to really dig in and to transform their lives? And I said, well, my story is I did that when I got divorced, right? That's when I was motivated. I was hungry. I was looking. And I had to work really hard to come up with all these answers, right? What if I started really working with women who were in this season of life and just give them back everything that I've learned? And so that's kind of where this specific niche was born, right? So I love working with all sorts of people. I obviously am a trauma-informed therapist. I work with couples still, but my heart is really in working with women who are going through divorce. Now, fast forward even further, I one winter, I'm scrolling Instagram and we're coming up on the holidays and there's some Instagram post about burnt out moms in the holidays. And I'm like, I feel attacked. And I read into it, right? And it's a constitutional homeopath, which it's like a big loop to open right here, right? But teaching about specific homeopathic remedies. What's a homeopathic remedy? Like arnica is a homeopathic remedy for burnt out moms. And something about it all of a sudden clicked. And so I started teaching myself homeopathy. And then I hired a homeopath to treat the cluster headaches. And then I hired a homeopath to start coaching me a little bit. And then I started ordering all these random remedies online. And then I ordered all the books. And then I bought the software. And then somehow found myself practicing constitutional homeopathy. And then what happened is the headaches went away and the rheumatoid arthritis went away and the attachment style evened out even better and the anxiety went away. And all of a sudden I was just like a really calm, happy, not angry, normal person that I think this is how people who have never been traumatized feel.
I want to begin with this whole idea of people are coming to you for couples counseling too late. Because I think a lot of our listeners, because I really want to delve into the other stuff, so I want to get this kind of out of the way, but I think it is important to note because a lot of our listeners are sort of on the fence of like, do I stay, do I go? And from my experience, I hear a lot of friends, colleagues, like people of, let's say, our vintage saying, oh, I'm going to couples counseling because my husband won't go to counseling on his own. So I feel like you hit on this, like they have different motivations for going. A lot of women I know in my life go to couples counseling because it's like a backdoor excuse or way to get their partners into therapy. So really couples should be going at the beginning of their dating. Like you start dating someone, great.
But
Let's
there's
learn how to communicate.
Attached.
I know, that's the problem.
There's a stigma. Oh, they're in therapy. They're
having trouble.
That means, it's funny. I heard the other day someone that I knew through the grapevine was mentioned that, oh, this couple's in therapy. And I said, good for them.
Yeah, great.
I was like, that's great.
Yeah,
I was like, that means they're working on their relationship and they're not waiting for it to, like you say, unglue or exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's a good thing. I'm like, but there's a stigma attached that if you go into therapy, it's because it's the last step. And maybe for some people it is.
Yeah. For a lot of people,
we
it
have
feels
to normalize.
It's the closure. It's like, well, I tried everything. I can tick that box.
I tried everything.
Yeah.
Before they make the decision to leave.
Like, I already know I want to leave, but I got to try everything. Or I
need that final bit of permission or piece of courage or clarity or I
need a therapist to tell me, you know what? You guys are...
So that was it wasn't really a question. That's all I wanted to add. But now ask
what's
question.
Interesting though is so when I started adding constitutional homeopathy, I get these calls, right? As a couples counselor, I get these calls and I get a lot of husbands that call because the wife bottom line them, right?
Fair. Yeah.
And then the wife comes in and says, like, I don't think there's a solution for this, right? I think I'm out the door, but I need to get this clarity, right? But then I add constitutional homeopathy and they get better. Like things that you would not think, right? Because homeopathy, it bypasses the conscious, it bypasses all of our resistance. And so you got to have someone who's pretty adventurous. It's like, sure, I'll take your random little sugar pellets, strange lady on the internet. But homeopathy is an old medicine. About 250 years ago, a doctor, the preeminent doctor of the day was Samuel Hahnemann, and he had studied in Leipzig and Vienna. And, what kind of medicine were they practicing 250 years ago? I don't know. I'm not sure I would want that today.
A lot of leeches, I think.
Yeah, leeches, right? Exactly. Well, I will tell you, they were treating malaria with cinchona bark.
Oh.
And they were taking this tincture from a tree or whatever, an herb, right? And that's how they were treating malaria. And so this guy gets a thought in the back of his head that's like, well, I don't have malaria. What happens if I eat the cinchona bark? And you know how we trust your crazy ideas, ladies, right? Like, isn't that how all amazing things were born? Trusting a crazy idea. So he gets this crazy idea. He eats the cinchona bark and he immediately develops the symptoms of malaria. Now, he didn't contract malaria. But basically, he poisoned himself, let's say, right, with cinchona bark. And what that presentation looked like was identical to malaria. And he was like, holy shit, I think I'm onto something.
Interesting.
And so then him and his little medical people, right, they start testing or proving other materials. So they're ingesting things to record the symptoms to match them to disease profiles, right? And that is homeopathy. So arnica... People think homeopathy just means natural medicine, comes from a plant or the earth or whatever, but that's not actually what it means. It means it's energy medicine. There's rarely any actual material on the pellets because that's not how homeopathy prepared. It's like Olaf said, how water has memory. It's like substance has an energetic memory or an imprint. And if we can take the energy signature of this plant, animal, mineral, whatever it is, right, and match it to the energy signature of your symptoms, it's that like calls to like, that these two things stimulate together and it clears something that's been blocked. So arnica is a plant that's found in really high altitudes that if you were rock climbing to these altitudes to harvest where actual arnica lives naturally, you would probably be bruised and have some cuts and scrapes just even trying to get the plant. It's the idea that everything is already kind of here on this planet. Based on what we need, right? And we just have to kind of harness what's already here. So arnica is a homeopathic remedy for bruises. It's going to help stimulate the body's natural healing response. Now, there are two different ways to use homeopathy. There's one, which is the arnica way. I have a bruise, it's acute, and I'm going to use this arnica and it's going to help speed the recovery of this bruise. Then there's the constitutional way, which says I'm going to take the totality of your symptoms through the entirety of your timeline, going all the way back. We can even treat things homeopathically that were inherited energetically, like generational inheritance of trauma and disease. And we're going to look for the remedy that best matches all of the symptoms. And that's how I use homeopathy in my therapy practice. I use remedies that go all the way back to get the stuff from 0 to 7, because that's what we're doing in EMDR. I'm just going to link it together, right?
Please.
In EMDR, we are going back to get the negative cognitions or beliefs about yourself that you got in your head somehow from 0 to 7 most of the time. And then the rest of your life has just been kind of living from that place of like your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that's really using those belief systems to filter the environment to say, to find the evidence that it's true.
It's like confirmation bias. Yeah,
exactly. And so we're using EMDR to reach all the way back in a timeline. When I add homeopathy to EMDR to reach back in the timeline, it's like, wow, the body just releases. Because EMDR really is energy work also, right? We're going back in time. We find a body sensation that goes with a memory. A lot of times when we have trauma, you can't even picture the memory, right? How many people say, oh, that season of life, I can't remember. I can't remember, right? But when you come to me and you say, my husband or my ex, right? When I look at my phone, my body gets electric when they're called, right? And it feels very scary. And then I get you in the session and I say, okay, really get into that body sensation. I say, float back through time. When else have you felt that electric body sensation? Right? And then I start bilaterally stimulating. We can tap, we can use eye movement, we can use all different types of bilateral stimulation, right? And we start following the memory network of all the places that energy got activated in you. And it got paired with a negative belief that I'm not safe, or I can't trust him, or I can't be myself, or I can't express my feelings. And then we desensitize and we reprocess that energy. So EMDR is a type of energy medicine. Homeopathy just goes a little deeper than that.
Or it supports it, I guess, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so is this really suitable for folks that maybe have like repressed memories or like trauma that they have closed that door on, they simply can't handle it? Because probably as a child, if you're talking 0 to 7, maybe there was one inciting incident or a pattern of behaviors, and it's just like out of my subconscious, I can't even, or I guess my conscious, I can't even deal with that in my conscious mind. I've closed that door, and now here I am showing up to your therapy. We're like, I don't know what's wrong. And you have to sort of uncover all of those hidden traumas.
Yes. And we are the most suppressed, repressed, or dissociated group of people ever, right? And it's because of technology, right? We have, between the technology and the wine, like who needs to feel anything?
That's going to be her quote. I love it. Love it. Honestly.
So many good numbing
There's
options.
so many numbing options. It's so true. But doesn't everybody have some type of trauma? Like, isn't it hard pressed to find someone who doesn't?
Good question.
Yes and no. I like actually getting into the nitty gritty of that question. It's fantastic. Everybody has negative beliefs about themselves that then reinforce, and lead to negative experiences. Where we're talking about trauma, there really are some very specific things that happen in the brain and the body to do with trauma. So like when we see people with autoimmune and these, like me with the cluster headaches, right? That's so resistance to any kind of treatment. Like then there are certain things that happen in the body that really are hallmarks of trauma. Has everybody experienced a negative experience and then internalized that as something flawed within themselves and it's altered the course of their life? Yes. Trauma, there's a difference between trauma, capital T,
Big
chronic
T,
trauma.
and negative experience.
Yeah.
And I think that is important to distinguish. Differentiate the two, because I think there is big T trauma. And I think that is a different kind of work, let's say in therapy. And those of us that are just simply suffering because of the human experience. And we have little T traumas that maybe have built up over time or generational, things like that. And would you say it's two different?
Yeah, what I hear a lot on Instagram, for instance, or TikTok is probably a better, right, is I hear mental health influencers describing an internalized negative belief as trauma, right? Think back from that time that your mom didn't respond to you appropriately when you got a bad grade or when you got bullied at school and then calling that a trauma. That's an internalized negative belief. It's a moment in time where I was like, oh, I'm not worth it. And then that belief got in me and it altered the course of my life. But that doesn't create the same neurological outcome in the brain and the body as true neglect or abuse or trauma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just don't want to diminish those with the big T traumas, because I think that is a very different experience.
I think the world has become desensitized to that term because of social media.
Woke.
Everyone's triggered. Oh, that triggered me. That triggered me. Everyone's triggered in trauma and triggered in trauma.
Too sensitive.
Right. And then there's people who actually experience real big T trauma, like child abuse, neglect, sexual assault, all those things.
Yeah.
And that gets like lumped into this like, oh, well, I got left out at recess that one day. Like, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
I will say that one of my like low-key anecdata, just from being a therapist, right? Anecdata, exactly.
Very cute.
Is that if you're divorced, there is a higher probability that you have experienced some kind of trauma and definitely have internalized negative beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Because to have attracted, I'm also a big believer in law of attraction. That like calls to like that we're vibrational beings and we attract to us exactly what we're vibrating, right? So, I could sit here and dish all the tea on what my ex-husband was doing or not doing when we were married. But like, I also was pretty sick. You know what I mean? Like, it was not well.
Yeah.
And so there is never anyone innocent in a marriage that ends, right? Both people typically have a lower vibrational state. And if you're experiencing a lower vibrational state in a marriage that's coming unraveled, there's a higher probability that you either inherited something energetically or experienced something at a young age that contributed to that outcome. But the more I learn homeopathy, the more I understand that we really can have inherited patterns. Not everything is trauma.
Right.
Some of it is genuinely inherited stuff, and we got to learn to work with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how do you take that and bring it to the divorce world? You work with people who have gone through the divorce, have experienced some type of, like you said, likely some type of trauma. How do you help them through that, through your different techniques?
Yeah. So because of everything I've said, right, I have really started to feel like traditional talk therapy is something that very often keeps people stuck and it actually blocks their healing. Because in traditional talk therapy, I come to my therapist and yes, I'm going to process on a certain level, on a conscious level, on an intellectual level. I may cry a bit in session, but I'm processing on the surface. Yeah. And the more I go to session and I'm processing on the surface and I'm rehearsing my pain, the more I'm actually reinforcing those neurological pathways that keep me vibrationally low.
Interesting.
Because you're experiencing them in session?
Over and over and over
and
again.
So
and
you know when you go to session, you're going to experience it. So your body prepares to experience it again.
It's just the rehearsing of the problem. The rehearsing of the problem just reinforces that that's what's true. Right. And it just reinforces that reticular activating system for that confirmation bias, right? And so if we're going to therapy and we're not digging deeper, if we're not really addressing the dissociative nature of our modern culture, if we're not getting into the body and metabolizing old stuck emotion, talk therapy is doing more harm than good.
Interesting. Well, and especially if you find out that you only need 3 sessions, so who the heck knows what your therapist is up to in their own world, right?
And then if you go with your partner, how is it effective? Because you're just sitting there throwing mud at each other, and then
there's a lot of
more often than not,
right?
That's
like
exactly
he did this
That's
and
exactly
she did that. Well, that was because you said this and she said that. And then where do you're going in?
And it's expensive and it takes a long time. And what's the prognosis? It's not good. It's not sustainable. Talk therapy as a solution is not sustainable.
Well, and Dawn, don't most people lie to their therapists?
Well, my clients don't, but that's because we attract our vibe, right? And so on my website, you can read about how I'm divorced and remarried. You can read about how I've been arrested. You could read, right? Like you can get the whole good. So I attract people who are like ready to work.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, a lot of people lie to their therapist. A lot of people lie to their therapist.
Well, and especially couples therapy, because you want to be right. You need to be vindicated. You need to prove that they're wrong, which then reinforces that you're right. So you're not actually focused on any of the below the surface stuff. It's really just about positioning. And this isn't everyone. And let's put the caveat out there. Some people are amazing.
No, but it is the bulk. It is the bulk.
You don't want to be as vulnerable maybe as you should or could.
Well, especially if it's performative. If you're just ticking the box, if you're just like, well, this is my last ditch effort to save my marriage, but really you already have one foot out the door.
Or trying to prove it's their fault, right? And get the therapist to sort of
get on your side.
Exactly. So then how?
Yeah, if I had $1 for every time one person in a couple was like, I'm going to tell Dawn.
So Some people at mediation do that too.
They do.
Wait till I tell Amanda what happened over the weekend. I'm like, well, I'm not the police, okay? I'm just your mediator.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. That's not my job. But yes, it can be like that. They need someone to just like,
So from my perspective, the way we do therapy in modern society really needs an overhaul, right? That there was a time where it really served, there was a time where we were so repressed where we didn't talk about anything, the 1950s and before, right? Where we were just such this puritanical repressed culture. We didn't talk about anything, but now we talk about everything on TikTok. Sometimes we're barely clothed when we do it. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
We don't really need to talk about it more. We really need to like heal it, right?
Right.
So from my perspective, there are 3 elements that are essential to really making the experience of divorce like a season of manifestation, right? To really transform your life. And that is, we got to get you stable and with a great solid support system in real time, right? You have to be taking good right action on a consistent basis. And let's be honest, most of us struggle with consistency and accountability.
Fair.
And most of us don't have enough support. I think that was one of the things I really learned from going through divorce. And I just dove into the support system space. But let's be honest, it was my career. There, right? Like healing was my career. So there was less friction maybe to accessing it than I think the average person, right? So the first element is we got to get you stable and we got to get you supported and you got to be taking good right action. The second element is you got to be processing the unprocessed stuff from your recent history and your remote history. Because unless you're really deeply processing those things in the body, deep enough, like EMDR deep or homeopathy deep, or transforming your negative beliefs into positive beliefs, right? Really retraining your neurology and your reticular activating system, you're not going deep enough. And you're going to live with an anxiety disorder or attracting, your picker being broken, like attracting bad dating partners, right? Like those are things that are going to keep resurfacing in your life over and over again. And we know that divorce rates go up with second and third marriages, right? Yeah. And then third element that has to happen with women and why I love this work so much is you have to be actively pursuing the manifestation that you want in your future. You have to have defined it. You have to know what it is that you want and you have to be taking steps towards it. And again, back to the accountability, right? You have to really be accountable to building that. And so how many women do I get and they're like, I just feel terrible. I feel stuck. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I don't know how to get to where I want to go. And sometimes I don't even know what it is. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I like to eat. I don't know what I like to do. I don't know who I want to attract. I can't, I just don't even know, Dawn. And that's because we're so dissociated and numb and in pain. It's just so much, right? Yeah. So this is why I love working with divorced women because there's from my view,
there's so much work to be done.
There's a very clear path to it, right? To having this really magical life and enough motivation at that season in life to get it done.
And what I like is that it's very future forward. Like I find therapy, which is why I didn't, I was on the crux of, do I go into relationship counseling? Do I go into mediation when I was deciding upon my second career? And I love therapy. And I quite frankly think everyone should be in it. Everyone can benefit something from it. But what I like about the work that Amanda and I do, mediation, we do a lot of coaching as well, one-on-one coaching, is it like, how are we going to get you to your goals? How can we move this forward? Because navel gazing is one thing. And yes, it's important to know what the trauma is or what the, whatever lived experience you have and why you have that block. But then let's go. Let's live our lives. Let's go. Right?
Yeah. It's a flaw in the structure of therapy, I think. There are a lot of therapists, right? And not trying to hate on my own profession, but I think there are a lot of therapists out there that just don't have the skills, the experience, haven't done their own work, don't have the training to really transform, right? And let's also take a look at our healthcare system. The body and the mind are intrinsically linked, right? We know this now. We have enough data. And so how can we put all of these healthcare pieces in silos from one another and not acknowledge how they all work together? Yeah. And so look at me, right? I had rheumatoid arthritis and cluster headaches, but it was absolutely rooted energetically. Yes, in some things that I inherited, but also very much in some things that I experienced. And so the healthcare system is going to always look at, health issues, I say in air quotes, right? As health issues and not as mental or emotional ones, but very often they are mental and emotional. So therapy, as we conceive of it, rarely is ever going to go far enough to really make enough, a meaningful difference in people's lives.
Right.
So I love teaching people how to do this stuff. I love teaching women how to do EMDR at home.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about this because this is so
do
fascinating.
It for us. Do it right now.
So, yeah, exactly. We need help. Okay, so firstly, you're doing
Be careful what you wish for.
I'm ready.
My producer came into work today because Monday is our podcast recording day, right? On Dear Divorce Diary. My producer came into work today, and after we kind of did the State of the Union, she's like, "Can you tell me why I can't stop crying?" We ended up on the floor right here, bilaterally stimulating.
Oh my God, I've never extended that.
I love that.
I'd love to try it.
So, but you're really trying to kill your own industry because you're teaching your clients how to do it themselves. Like, are you just removing yourself from the equation?
Well, listen, I think that unfortunately there's a backlog of people who need it, right? So in my lifetime, I don't think I'm putting myself out of a
shortage. So wait, so what does that look like?
Yeah. So EMDR is the process of activating, like just tapping in, right? Just getting in touch with something painful and then adding bilateral stimulation. So, we hear the butterfly tap, right? Crossing your arms across your chest and just left, right tapping is bilateral stimulation. There are a lot of audio tracks these days on any of the meditation apps, like that have bilateral beats.
Oh.
It's the same thing, right? In EMDR, originally, they used eye movement, which is bilaterally moving your eyes, which mimics what happens in REM sleep. What happens in REM sleep? We're dreaming, we're processing the unprocessed stuff from our day, from our life. I think one of the biggest problems with our healthcare system right now is how out of touch we are with our own ability to heal ourselves. And we have sold ourselves out to doctors and lawyers, lady, right? Yeah. Like you ladies do what you do because you know that too many people put their fates into the hands of just lawyers without believing that they can advocate for themselves or navigate the legal system. We feel so disempowered. Our bodies were built to process using bilateral stimulation. No one owns that. No therapist owns that. And I think that if we really could empower people to know, hey, you can't heal in a vacuum. We all need support, right? We all need someone to hold space for us while we cry. In fact, part of the reason that trauma happens is because you experience something too overwhelming to process, not enough support, right? Too overwhelming to process, which means you didn't have enough resource to make sense of it or heal it or clear it out, right? So you can't completely eliminate healers from your healing process, but you can do so much of it at home. Let's say you're lonely in this divorce process. What woman has not felt lonely? And it's not unique to women, men too, right? But what person hasn't felt deep loneliness? I think loneliness is one of the most powerful clues we have as to how we're doing in our healing journey, how dissociated or cut off we are from ourselves or others. Loneliness is rarely about missing a connection with other people. It's almost always a clue about how disconnected we are from self, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so how often, if you were lonely, could you, tap into that, bilaterally stimulate, write in your journal and shift without having to pay me between $300 and $500 an hour at a scheduled time, probably in the middle of your workday when your kids need to be picked up from school. You know what I mean? How much of that could you own for yourself? And I think a lot of my job right now is just convincing women to have the courage to try it.
And to have those tools at your fingertips when you are in the mind space to receive it. Like, I think that a lot of times with therapy, I'll see you at 2:00 on Tuesday in between my dentist appointment and picking up the kids, but you're not really there, right? And then you have to pull yourself back to how you were feeling last week to actually get the most out of the therapy.
Which from a law of attraction standpoint is dumb. So let's say, and I find very often that my clients come to session and they're like, oh my God, I was so glad this was today. So we love it when therapy is well-timed, right? Sure. But what about when you go to therapy and you're feeling pretty good?
Yes. And then you leave and you're like, oh, shit.
From a law of attraction standpoint, that is dumb. If we attract what we're putting out there, if everything is vibrational and you can't fake a vibration, we could fake a lot of shit in life, right?
And we do.
But you can't fake a vibration. You have all that stuff suppressed and repressed. But if you're genuinely feeling good, one of the most self-sabotaging things you can do is go rehearse a story from last week about how your mother-in-law did this dumb thing, It's just not, it's not being a good steward of your mental or emotional health. So I think there's so many ways that we need to overhaul this. And I'm not the only one doing it. There's another woman that I found on Instagram. Her Instagram handle is Felt Sense. Her name is Jenna Ham. And she built this, an entire resource called, she originally called it the library. I don't remember what she calls it now, but where she teaches internal family systems, bilateral simulation. She teaches all nervous system regulation. She's teaching people for a very low cost. So there are those of us out there that are tapped into this and we're practicing it and we're really trying to empower people.
I was just going to say, I think I see so many similarities in what you're talking about in the work that we do, which is empowering these couples that are divorcing to make their own choices, right?
Yes.
Don't stand in front of a judge and have them dictate the terms of your divorce.
Exactly.
You
treat the symptoms.
choose. Yeah, you get to choose what you want your life after divorce to look like. And this is so similar. You can choose the time. You can choose where in your home you feel safe and comfortable enough to do this kind of work. And do it for yourself.
And it'll be longer lasting if you do, right? Just like the work that we do when people come to us and make agreements together in a mediation session, those agreements last longer.
Yes.
Because they've had...
Right? That's a no-brainer.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
They've done it
You
themselves.
have two bought-in people, two people who contributed to the solution collaboratively.
Right.
Yeah.
Not imposed upon
rather
them.
than...
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's basically what you are doing, trying to empower these women to take control of their mental health, which is so beautiful. So I would imagine they're coming to you, you're, let's say, maybe bringing in some of these different modalities. Do you kind of see what sticks? Like, does one way work for everyone? Or is it a bit of like choose your own adventure, see what works and what doesn't?
So I think that's one of the things, in my very long intro about who I am and how I got here, I think that's one of the things that I love about it is I have tried it all.
You're no stranger to this.
But I love that you have, because then you can speak to it. You've tried all of the methods.
So there are things that I believe genuinely work for everyone. And those are the things that I really employ, right? But there are a lot of fringe things that, like, I'm a big fan of human design. Have y'all gotten into human design?
No, tell us more.
I don't know. It's like a combination of astrology and Kabbalah tree of life and I Ching and all this stuff. And it tells you what your energy type is. And it's way too big of a loop to open and close here. But, it takes your birth time and all that. And it tells you what your energy type is and your personality and when it's best for you to eat and digest and how you best manifest. And right, it's super fun. I know. Now
I'm into
that's what you're going to be looking up later.
She's reading a book about it tonight.
I'm into all the woo-woo. I can't get enough.
Yeah. Well, and when I found it, like I went head first and I loved it and I definitely started incorporating it into my practice. But that's like a, if you love it, let's use it kind of thing, right? But EMDR paired with some form of homeopathy and homeopathy can even be, you can make a homeopathic remedy like from a flower essence. Have you ever been in like Whole Foods in their natural remedy and they have these Bach flower essences in these little vials or like rescue remedy? That's all just energy medicine that's helping you clear what's already in there. I have seen people pivot so much just from a handful of flower essences, but it goes deeper because our conscious mind tries to run the show, right? We like to think so much. We're overthinkers. We glorify how much we overthink anymore. So any remedies that are going to get you into the body, they're going to shift you energetically, are going to just supercharge your healing process, help you rewire your brain. So those are the things that I go for, the stuff that like, I'm going to bypass all of the neuroses, right? All of the bad behavior we do, if you will.
How does one then know what to take? Because some of this stuff that you might be taking, this homeopathic stuff, can be contraindicated to other things that you might be taking, more pharmaceutical. So like, how do you, people, I think we're in a world where people self-medicate a lot with different things, especially with Google, Dr. Google. So how do you make sure if you're, embarking on this journey on your own at home and you want to try some homeopathy, like how do you do it safely?
Yeah. So I actually I've never found that any of it's contraindicated to pharmaceuticals, right? But I will say, to your point, that dose and potency matter. And that goes for anything, right? If I drink too much water, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. If I don't drink enough water, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. Right. So that's a really kind of dramatic example with a pretty benign substance, but dose and potency matters. And there is such a thing as too much energy medicine, and there's such a thing as not enough energy medicine. And I think that when EMDR doesn't work for people. I've had a lot of people come to me and say EMDR doesn't work. And typically that's because they're too dissociative and the therapist wasn't able to help them get grounded enough, meaning the dose and potency was not enough, right? We had to figure out how to turn the volume up on the dose and potency in the EMDR to make an impact. And it's the same with flower essences, right? If I go to Whole Foods and I stand in that line and I pick one and I didn't get any result from it, either I didn't pick the right one or the dose and potency doesn't match the amount of distress that I'm in. Does that make sense? It wasn't strong enough and I need something a little more. So I want people to feel free to explore with these things, but know that in our culture of more is better, with energy medicine, more is not better.
Yeah, it sounds like they still need a practitioner to support.
Don't just do it yourself. Is sort of what you're saying. Like
you're going to make more progress faster if you have a practitioner. Yeah. And I love teaching people. I have a 21-day immersive journaling program. It's like a mini course, right? It's $33. And in there, I have remedy suggestions, the basic ones that, you know, minimal dose and potency, like the ones that attracted me to homeopathy in the first place. Burnt out mom remedy, best stress remedy, best grief remedy, best, you know, flower essence. And I talk about them on my podcast all the time. I'll say, this flower essence is for this. Try it. It can't hurt. It's $12 on Amazon, right? Worth a try. What do you have to lose?
Yeah, because you really, divorce is such a unique experience in that you are feeling all levels of different, you know, different feelings. Yes.
Yeah. And not in one particular order.
Never in a particular order.
And once you're through one, it's not that they're done. It comes back.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, it's really.
So you do need to still tailor to each sort of client's unique experience.
I think that's true with any solution, right? The more tailored it is, the better, the more significant the transformation. And do you find that to be true?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
I'm curious the timeline. So somebody comes to you going through divorce, they're having a hard time, they're feeling burnt out, they're feeling all of those things. What's a timeline for how to get them feeling like themselves again?
Such a good question. I think obviously it varies based on where in their divorce timeline, right? Like, because, you know, there are periods in divorce that are just like more consuming than others. But I will tell you, we have a 12-month program for women. It's a very intimate group of 12 women to walk the path of healing for 12 months together. But it's got all those elements of processing the past, really staying on track with the future. I mean, with the present and manifesting the future. And I think the 12 months of concentrating on all three of those elements is like, you could be literally a very different person in 12 months if you had that level of support and, you know, specificity in your healing journey.
So in your opinion, talk therapy is dead, or is talk therapy just needing a bit of a facelift with different modalities, different way of dealing with all of our repressed experiences and junk that we have to
or is it not for everybody?
Yeah, I think there's a nuanced answer to that, right? I think at a minimum needing a massive facelift. And I think that for people of privilege, it definitely needs a major overhaul. If you think about, there are some people though who I think there are people who are less privileged who could benefit from starting by talking. Right? From starting just by having someone listen, that's a great starting place. But for most people who live in modern society and have an iPhone, that's not that, right? Like if I have TikTok and an iPhone,
Yeah, we do.
But for people who really never had any kind of present parent, right? Like if you think about kids who grew up in horribly neglected situations, like just starting by talking is enormously helpful. But I think even then, right, we run the risk of just kind of accidentally reinforcing because you can't think yourself out of trauma. And the majority of what we do in therapy is think. We feel a little, but we mostly think.
Well, especially folks that are very cerebral, sort of by design, then we are I say we because it's 100% me. We overthink every single thing. Is there somebody who this is not appropriate for? And like, I'm wondering about kids. Could, you know, if parents are going through this divorce, they're worried about their kids are struggling through the turmoil of divorce. Is this appropriate for them?
If I was going through divorce and I had a kid, because again, I didn't have a kid when I was getting divorced, right? The first thing I would do is not take the kid to a therapist. I would take the kid to a homeopath.
Interesting.
And that's So isn't that so interesting?
Yeah.
And of course, my kid is being treated homeopathically as well for the stuff that she inherited. But you know, kids in talk therapy, there is a book out that is so amazing that I must mention here, and it's called Bad Therapy. So I'm not the first person to talk about this, right? Bad Therapy is written by Abigail Schreier. Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up. And it's this idea that we have this generation of parents that don't know how to address the issues that, you know, we're dealing with in modern culture, and they're sending their kids to therapy to deal with them. Yep. And then these kids are getting inundated by ideas, and therapists tend to be very liberal, very, very liberal, woke ideology, for whatever that's worth. Yeah. And then kids are being exposed at a very young age when they have very malleable brains to ideas and concepts that aren't necessarily in line with family values, or and again are at risk of all the things we talked about here, just talking about the problem and not the solution, not actually getting to the root cause. And so any treatment has its downside, right? And I don't think we've talked about the downside of therapy really in modern culture.
No,
we've
definitely
avoided
not.
therapy. We've talked about the stigma of therapy.
Yeah.
Right. Like
right.
It's a good, always a positive thing when it comes to kids.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry.
Therapy,
they're in therapy.
Yeah.
Like even when we were starting this conversation, I was like, oh, well, that's great. This couple's in therapy.
Totally.
Great. But then
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Right.
Well, we've just learned that it is, in fact, reinforcing that neurological pathway.
I'm curious, though, about treating kids, because obviously it's different than adults, and you have to be careful with what you give your kids. And what are these? Are there any downsides to, you know, trying some of these methods with kids?
Like homeopathy or EMDR? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So anytime you're going to really tackle healing something, think about it. If I slam my finger in that door right now, what's going to happen? It is going to swell up, and it is going to get red, and it is going to be hot, and it is going to be uncomfortable for days. Healing is a hot, inflamed, sticky, messy, uncomfortable process. And so if you are going to tackle healing and you're not really oriented to the amount of support that's needed to really go through a healing process. Look, Lilliput woke up from her nap. She's like, hey. So yeah, I do think that, you know, for instance, you know, when my producer came today and she's like, I can't stop crying. And we did a little EMDR, and then we pulled out a remedy that was just so perfect for her. And within 30 minutes of me giving her the remedy, we're recording episodes, right? And she's like, Dawn, I'm exhausted. I could put my head down on the desk and fall asleep right now, because her body is like, oh, I feel safe now. I can rest now, right? So, but if you do that with kids or anybody, right? And then you're not able to meet them where they're at, you're not able to support them with their basic needs for like healing or recovering. Like, that can be very destabilizing. EMDR typically for the first few sessions, very destabilizing. People feel exhausted afterwards. That's a theme, right? I think with any of this type of work, like because it's experiential, because you're desensitizing stuff that's been locked in the cells of your body for so long. It's exhausting, it's hot, it's inflamed, it's messy. And they report having these crazy dreams for several nights afterwards. They're more emotional. They have new memories surfacing. That can be destabilizing. Healing is hard work.
So parents need to be aware and like sort of have some, I guess, answers to the kids' questions, or at least be cognizant that if they are extra sleepy or if they have weird dreams, that's sort of all part and parcel to the work.
Yeah. Anytime we're doing really deep healing work, what we're doing is we're expressing what's been suppressed. So like think about Dr. Pimple Popper. We're expressing what's been suppressed, right? What's that look like?
All coming to surface.
So sometimes we think about like, expressions as symptoms bad.
Right.
Actually, symptoms are a part of healing, right? Expressing what's been suppressed is a clear sign of healing. We got to reframe how we think about that.
Yeah. We got to reframe a lot of stuff. That's fair.
So interesting.
So fascinating.
I'm really
You learning
so much?
I'm learning so much. Have we pulled you over to the woo-woo side?
A little bit. You're pulling me over to the woo-woo side.
You can't
be journaling before you know it.
Oh my goodness, right? But listen, all the woo stuff, think that's one of the things my brain, I'm a Gemini. All right. There's two of me over here. We're in Gemini season. But what I love about all the woo stuff is also, I'm going to take it to the exact opposite end, is pretty definable in quantum physics, right? It's like most stuff that we call woo can be defined scientifically.
Right.
It just hasn't been widely accepted in popular culture, right? Like, and if you can't make a profit on it, it's not as popular. And anytime we're curing anything, we're not profiting as much as when we're perpetuating something.
Yeah,
exactly.
fair enough.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So I love talking about it in terms of woo, but the reality is that there are often very scientific underpinnings that just aren't as profitable.
But do you find it's as, I guess, useful or what's the word I'm looking for, successful if folks don't buy in? Like if they have a block to this, I mean, like, I'm just taking these weird water or flower essences, whatever, sure, give it to me because no harm, no foul. But like, I don't actually believe in the science behind that. Is it less effective?
Nope.
Interesting.
Nope. And I have
studies done.
There
have to be a study. I mean, I would assume there are some studies done on these remedies.
Of course there are, but I think if you Google homeopathy, there is very little more controversial on the internet than homeopathy. But I will tell you, I have treated couples. A few of them come to mind. But one in particular where the husband will swear to this day that those little sugar pellets don't work. But this is just not someone who would have gotten better in traditional talk therapy. And the wife will tell you today that they're still married because of the little sugar pellets. Like,
interesting.
This person went from being very angry and explosive and pretty self-absorbed, right? I hate to throw the N-word around, the narcissist. So it's overused, right? Like, but like, really hard time for, avoidant attachment style. We could throw that one over, like a lot of that stuff. Right. And just from like the first dose of the right one. And sometimes you have to hunt and peck a little bit, right? It's not always right out of the gate. Homeopathy and flower essences. Listen, I've got some very cool clients who have been very, very doubtful and people who are high profile, high power. I don't know. And they're like, holy crap. I did not believe that this was going to work.
I want to try.
Same thing with EMDR.
I want to try it. I've had my doubts, but I want to try it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so couples counseling. Maybe this is our last question. I don't know what time it is, but I am curious. Okay, we are so obviously individualized. Yes, there's a lot of similarities with people just generally, but for the most part, people have let's say a unique experience or perspective as we walk the world. Can you really sit on a couch or whatever with your partner and have the same benefits with one therapist as you would if that same couple went their own ways, sought out their own therapy, individualized therapy, and then came together as just, let's say, more grounded or more aware or more trauma-informed or more healed to then approach that relationship?
Friends? Can we just be best friends?
No, she's
now?
mine. She's mine.
All three of us. Like, I know you're far away, but listen,
not that far.
Yes
is the answer.
Back to why I, really started working more with women, and I still work with couples, right? But if more people were doing the deep level of work that we're talking about here, right? Did their work, they wouldn't need couples counseling.
Yes.
Couples counseling is like, it is, I think, the destigmatized thing that, and this is really interesting. I'm going to get into the behind the scenes stuff of the business end of what I do. Okay. My main therapy practice is in Boca Raton, Florida, Palm Beach, right? One of you was recently in Palm Beach, no?
I was in Miami Beach.
Oh, you were in Miami Beach. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Palm Beach, right? Yeah. And the most popular search term on the internet for therapy is marriage counseling in Boca Raton, Florida. So what does that tell you? It tells you exactly what you asked me halfway through the session, that this is like the cover, right? Like this is like the safe, more approachable way to engage therapy that has less stigma associated with it. Yep. And so if more people just said like, gosh, my life isn't going all that well right now. Perhaps there are some things I need to get honest with myself about and I need to work through. couples counseling would not be so widely indicated. I think it's a symptom of us being in denial and avoidance and dissociative, right? Like not wanting to take responsibility as a culture. We just want to be victims. We want it to be somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think marriage counseling has the greatest search demand and is the least helpful tool of all the tools that is available. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. It was perfect.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love
so
that.
much information. So interesting to think about it like that.
Amazing. Like it's just a fresh approach, which I think is what a lot of folks are looking for, right? There are so many people that are in that traditional talk therapy. They're like, I've been doing this my whole life, or for 10 years, right?
Or they leave just feeling like shit.
You either feel worse or you feel the same, or you just feel like there's no momentum. And so I think this, I don't know, for me personally, it just gives me a lot of hope that that there is, I know we talked, woo-woo-y, but
there's alternatives.
But there's alternatives, and there's just like a fresh new approach that if you just want to try something new, there are people out there that are finding success, and that's a beautiful thing. And so we are inundated online with a lot of therapists, a lot of coaches that are trying to help people and are trying to be, cutting edge, maybe just for additional views or likes or what have you. And so I think a lot of folks, because there is so much information out there, are starting to grasp some of their own mental health struggles, some of their own issues, and are as a result more open to new strategies, which gets me excited. So if our listeners loved what they heard from you, Dawn, how do they find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I have a podcast, Dear Divorce Diary, anywhere you listen to podcasts, right? And you can also find me on my website, mycoachdawn.com, where, we have the loneliness roadmap, where is the freebie that you can log into, where I teach you how to EMDR yourself, basically, right? To do with loneliness specifically. Yeah. So you can find all that on my website, mycoachdawn.com.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You've really opened my eyes to this world, which is not easy to do sometimes.
No.
So gosh, I'd love to can we flip the script now? Tell me more.
Turn off the recording now. We're going to get into it, okay?
Thank you so much, Dawn. This has been such a pleasure. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh,
that was amazing.
Take care.
This episode was written and created by Alex Howard and Amanda Silver. Produced, edited, and engineered by RTF Productions. Make sure to rate and review our show if you loved it, and give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast to stay up to date on all upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and go easy on us. We're not your ex.